Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thank you kindly for stopping by. I'm looking forward to the Christmas holidays, as I'm sure you are too. We're going to get away early on the 24th and drive down, and I'll read you something that I wrote last year momentarily. Aaron was a tour de force at Mindspeak. So many wonderful anecdotes to come out of it. Rufus is editing it right now. He told us he'd sold concerts out via Twitter. Simon Plum, I used to think Aaron has magic fingers, but I'm learning it's all about practice and a desire to learn. I wrote, stick to it, practice, 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 says Aaron. Giuliani turned up, Christine Kamau as well. We took a photo, we took a selfie of everybody. And then I was chatting to Giuliani because he was a guest a year ago. And we talked about the music business. And I said to him, look, why don't we just do some research and put together a small report based on our best estimates. So we're going to work on that. But we'll have this uploaded later on today, I hope. Home thoughts, my Christmas holiday ritual is to jump into a car and take the family down to the coast. I wrote this last year. The Nairobi-Mombasa road arrows into immensities and is impossible to believe. That's a quotation. It retains a near mystical hold on my imagination and connects me to my childhood and beyond. Dad used to once own an Alfa Romeo, of which there were only 3 then in the country, and of course no one could fix it. And my pilgrimage along that road started then, when we used to come from Mombasa up to Nairobi. Now, of course, we set off from Nairobi, but the road still has its hold. The landmarks still reach out to me. There was a time we were swarmed by doves near Imali, which was breathtaking. There is still the eerie and deserted, very Oscar Niemeyer building, which might have been a petrol station with a restaurant on top. But it's always been deserted ever since I can remember. However, I have seen photographs of people seemingly stopping and having a meal. We stopped at Makindu, which is like being teleported to Amritsar. It's a Sikh temple. And on New Year's Day, when we went there last, it was packed to the rafters. Always stop at McKinnon Road, where there is a shrine which houses the tomb of Saeed Bagali, a Punjabi foreman at the time of the building of the railway, who was renowned for his strength. And last year we took ourselves off to Vipinga and Watamu, and there was an absolutely incredible beach at Vipinga that we discovered, and you accessed it via a ladder, and it was like you were descending from the real world into another. I'll put up a photograph of that beach. It really was extraordinary. Another one of wild white flowers on the road between Imali and Amboseli. And I'm looking forward to being on the beach big time, frankly. And Hannah and I are going to Wasini Island to see the dolphins. And I'll put up some footage of the time that I went without her, but with her big sisters, because I wasn't sure how deep it was and whether she could cope then. She wasn't a good swimmer, now she is. And we went with this fellows, and I tweeted, if you ever fancy a trip into another century, go to Wasini Island with the captain. I'll put up a photograph of him. Political reflections. Never in recent memory have so many children been subjected to such unspeakable brutality. This is UNICEF. Children have been killed while studying in the classroom and while sleeping in their beds, said Anthony Lake, the executive director of UNICEF. They have been orphaned, kidnapped, tortured, recruited, raped, and even sold as slaves. It's an awful story, really. My weekend piece was 2014 has been an extraordinary year. I started with Thomas Pynchon. Bleeding edge, no matter how the official narrative on this turns out. These are the places we should be looking, not in newspapers or television, but at the margins, graffiti, uncontrolled utterances, bad dreamers who sleep in public and scream in their sleep. 2014 has been an extraordinary year, from the disappearance into thin air of one of Malaysian Airlines' Boeing 777s to another shot clean out of the sky. The viral threat reared its head in West Africa, and Ebola threw the world into a frenzy. Friction levels ratcheted higher. There is evidently an intersection point between geopolitics and the financial markets. President Obama and his team have proven incredibly effective specialists of the 21st century's currency and oil warfare. Look at Russia. Currency is down 44%. They're bouncing quite hard this morning. Vladimir Putin, and I think this is his greatest failure, simply failed to comprehend what was about to be visited on him. At $60 a barrel, Russia and Iran, Venezuela and others are significantly diminished. And then right at the end of the year, President Obama pulls Cuba out of the hat. For decades, the diehards in Florida have called the foreign policy shots with regard to Havana. That has just ended. Is Cuba a precursor for the big one, Iran? And then, of course, we have this awful spectacle of terrorism. It seems we are held in paralysis by any crackpot who grabs an AK-47 and looks for his Warholian moment. Andy Warhol said in 1975 that in the future, everyone will be world famous for 15 minutes. The Daesh, Boko Haram, Taliban, Al-Shabaab have morphed into the 21st century Grim Reapers, prowling on the fringes of our world and imagination and fighting a sophisticated war of narrative control. Against this uncertain and volatile backdrop, the dollar ends higher against all except one of its 31 peers in 2014, the Hong Kong dollar, which is pegged to it, which is up 0.01%. The last time the dollar produced a similar performance was 1997. The dollar index is at its highest level since 2006, and I believe the dollar is headed a lot higher in 2015. The US economy remains in essence a consumer-led economy. The US consumer is set to receive $1 trillion stimulus from the collapse in the oil price. This is meaningful and will lead the Fed to a series of interest rate increases in 2015. The first interest rate increase by the Fed will roil global markets, and the dollar will surge higher again. Oil, of course, has been the banner story in the financial markets this year. United States WTI has retreated 43% through 2014. The Brent crude has retreated 45%. These moves have been unprecedented and startling. The plan to undercut oil prices was brilliantly conceived and executed. This year we witnessed a 21st century oil warfare of a very sophisticated kind. I expect prices to remain low, $50 per barrel for the WTI average in 2015, and for longer. Petro-producing economies will remain under pressure. Petro-consumers will gain traction. In fact, a blistering 41% rally in Chinese stocks over the last 6 weeks might well be inversely correlated to oil. This exponential collapse in oil prices is a singular and important inflection point in the world's affairs. The collateral damage from this currently Darwinian or oil war is being felt big time in sub-Saharan Africa's big oil economies, Nigeria and Angola. Nigeria might well have imposed stealth capital controls last week. The Naira remains close to all-time lows and will weaken as far as 220 to the dollar. If things get disorderly, all bets are off. Angola's Kwanza is on the ropes. Here in Kenya, the shilling, whilst trading at 2011 lows, has once more delivered a resilient Teflon performance. The old share, whilst taking a punch to the solar plexus last week, is 14.3% up in 2014 and will make it a winning sequence of 3 bull years. The transmission of the more than 40% fall in oil has been very poor, with the 10% price reduction seen so far. This is not tenable and impairs our bona fides. With $2.7 billion, $2.75 billion of our bonds out there, impairing our bona fides now carries a price. Rwanda, interestingly, trades tighter to the US than Kenya. I take you back to Andy Warhol. In the future, everyone will be world famous for 15 minutes. Global Research has an article, The Ruble Crisis, Economic Warfare. The New York Times wrote the sensible thing for Mr. Putin to do would be to withdraw from Ukraine. This would bring immediate relief from sanctions, and that would ease the current crisis and give officials room to start fixing the country's economic problems. The question is whether this reckless leader has been sufficiently chastened to change course. This is now the person writing the article. Were Russia to accept the US-NATO diktat, its surrender would simply set the stage for further demands whose ultimate outcome would be the actual breakup of the country. In another article from Counterpunch, in the last 10 months, the United States has executed a near-perfect takedown of the Russian economy. Following a sloppy State Department-backed coup in Kiev, Washington has consolidated its power in the capital, removed dissident elements in the government, deployed the CIA to oversee operations, launched a number of attacks on rebel forces in the east, transferred ownership of Ukraine's vital pipeline system, created a toll booth separating Moscow from the EU, foiled a Russian plan to build an alternate pipeline to southern Europe, built up its military assets in the Balkans and Black Sea, and finally, the cherry on the cake, initiated a daring sneak attack on Russia's currency by employing its Saudi proxy to flood the market with oil, push prices off a cliff, and trigger a run on the ruble which slashed its value by more than half, forcing retail currency platforms to stop trading the battered ruble until prices stabilized. Like we said, Putin might be a great chess player, but in his battle with the US, he's getting his clock cleaned. The rout of the ruble is perhaps the most astonishingly successful asymmetrical attack in recent memory. I wrote about this on the 1st of December when I said this is a very 21st century shock and awe, and a bullet has not even been fired. I put up a 3-month chart of the Russian ruble, which is having a strong bounce this morning. Ambassador Samantha Power tweeted, troubling amendments infringing on very human rights guaranteed by Kenya's constitution being considered in new security bill must be removed, which is pretty forthright. New Yorker has an article about Samantha Power asking, she has the president's ear, but to what end? Power often talks about bending the curve, her preferred phrase, and Obama's for a good intervention, the point where the technical meets the humane. Then in another paragraph, initially Power tended to drone on at meetings, and she had yet to learn how to wire a room by planting and testing her ideas with others beforehand. Power acknowledges the trade-offs in geopolitics in the way that did not figure into her theories a decade ago. She told me you have to take into account the other collateral issues that you're dealing with on the international stage. Our Ukraine standoff with Russia has bearing on our Syria political play. Our effort to secure a nuclear deal that denies Iran a path to a nuclear weapon is a huge priority right now. That's part of what's on your mind as you're thinking about particular tactical choices. So this composite calculus is what the president has to be doing all the time. Put up a photograph of her, Barack Obama, and another photograph of Kim Jong-un surrounded by well-wishers on a visit to the Kim Jong-suk Pyongyang textile mill. Currency markets, Euro 122.41. The dollar had touched 122.20, which was the strongest level since August 2012. Dollar index 89.59. Japanese yen 119.53. Swissy 0.9829. Pound 156.41. Aussie 0.8157. And that's after it touched 81.07 on December the 17th, which was a June 2010 low. India rupee 63.245, South Korean won 1097.57, Rial 266.03, Egyptian pound 714.58, but softer on the black market, and the rand 1158.38. The dollar is up 12% this year. The yen is down 2.9%, and the euro down 1.6%. I'll put up a 3-month chart of the dollar index. I think that index is going to 100. I've been thinking that since 29th of September and before. The 29th of September, I said, I think the dollar has just started getting going. There will be blood in the water. A small window if we want to be the sharks. I'll put up a photograph of the shark to buy more. Bloomberg is referencing former Treasury Secretary John Connally, who summed up the US's attitude towards nations moaning about the dollar's gyrations in 1971 when he said, "It's our currency, but it's your problem." Euro dollar, 122.41. I think there's a chance we get a parity next year. Crude oil had a very strong session on Friday, got squeezed. Last time I checked, we were at $58.05. But prices have fallen 47% since settling at 107.26, which was a 2014 high on June 20. US oil output has been the game changer, 9.14 million barrels a day in the week ended December 12th, highest level in weekly EIA data going back to 1983. Naimi said to reporters if they want to cut production, they are welcome. We're not going to cut. Certainly Saudi Arabia is not going to cut. Go back to the 13th of October when I said, the important news is that the US is the new price setter for the oil markets and that this is a deep and important geopolitical development. Then, which was in October, I was saying the new price levels will have immediate, enormous geopolitical and financial knock-on effects. It will place intolerable pressure on oil producers, and particularly those operating from a higher base price. It is not too difficult to calculate who are the biggest losers in this new price normal, and Vladimir Putin's Russia springs to mind first. Then mentioned something Thomas Donilon had said in 2011. America's new energy posture allows us to engage from a position of greater strength. Increasing US energy supplies act as a cushion that helps reduce our vulnerability to global supply disruptions and price shocks. It also affords us a stronger hand in pursuing and implementing our international security goals. Put up a 3-month chart. In December I said the oil price collapse marks a major inflection point. The global consumer is back. Report on Bloomberg saying the average price of regular gasoline at US pumps slid to the lowest level since May 15, 2009. It's a dramatic boon to fuel consumers. Gasoline is a modest portion of our giant gross domestic product, yet it does have a pervasive and festive benefit to motorists. Point. Gold just below 1200, 1198.09. Ebola death toll in 3 African countries hits 7,373 WHO, among 19 and 31 cases known to date. Latest data was posted on the WHO website, reflected nearly 500 new deaths from the worst ever outbreak. Guinea, Liberia and Sierra Leone since December the 17th. Sierra Leone accounts for most of the cases. A student was killed in clashes at an opposition rally in Gabon's capital, where police fired tear gas to disperse protesters demanding the resignation of President Ali Bongo Ondimba. The opposition claimed 3 people had died and hundreds were injured in the violence, though there was no official confirmation of those figures. Ali, get out, 50 years is too long, the crowd chanted. President Ondimba took office after the 2009 death of his father, Omar Bongo, who had been in power since 1967. The political climate in the West African country has worsened recently with the publication of a book by journalist Pierre Payen, which accuses the president of having falsified his birth certificate and diplomas. Jean Ping has been tweeting as well. He is in the opposition camp. I'll put up a photograph of President Ali Bongo and a photograph of protests in Gabon. And go back to the point I was making about Ouagadougou. What was Ouagadougou's signal to sub-Saharan Africa? It's all about reaching escape velocity. Preeminent point to note is that protests in Burkina Faso achieved escape velocity. Overthrowing incumbents is all about acceleration and speed. The Central Bank of the Six Nations Central African Monetary Union, BEAC, cut its growth forecast for the region to 4.9% for this year, versus an earlier estimate of 5.6%, said in a statement on Friday. Due mainly to the effect of the fall in oil prices, the updated forecast for 2014 showed growth of 4.9%, versus an earlier forecast of 5.6%, against growth of 1.3% in 2013. Cameroon, Chad, Congo Republic, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon and CAR, 5 of them are oil producers. South African oil share is up 6.76% this year, at about 49,000 again. South Africa's Zuma says he's in perfect health after post-election fatigue. Bout of fatigue left him hospitalized in June. Noticeably lost weight since coming to power. Hospitalized for 2 days of tests following what his office said was a demanding schedule in the run-up to May's national election. I think we did overstretch ourselves. I think they are fatigued thereafter, Zuma said in an interview. There was a period where I really took it easy. I couldn't say my health was in perfect condition. I'm in perfect condition now, but at that time one could feel the strain of elections. Sunday Times newspaper reported in June that Zuma's hospitalization was triggered by heart problems, diabetes and high blood pressure. His spokesman later dismissed the report. I'll put up a photograph of Zuma delivering a speech at the closing ceremony of the 2014 Year of South Africa in China, Beijing, December 5. Dollar Rand 11.58.29. We're in this range 11 to 12. I think we go to 12. Egyptian pound 7.14.54. Officially, unofficially at 7.80. The Egyptian stock market bounced 3.46% yesterday, back to being up 28.133%. Nigerian oil share firmed marginally. It's now down 26.67% year to date. Ghana, that's up 7.0862% year to date. The Washington Post is reporting that Kenya is saying to the US, our terror laws are better than yours. US State Department Jen Psaki said Friday, we're concerned about provisions that appear to limit freedom of assembly and media and access to asylum for refugees. Munyori Buku, a senior official at the State House, said in a statement on the President's website Saturday that Kenya's new law has checks and balances, unlike US security laws that have created the Guantanamo Bay Detention Center and given US FBI and intelligence officers a carte blanche in the fight against terrorism and biological warfare. Kenya is to launch a derivatives market. NSE will now establish a globally competitive derivatives exchange that will enable spot and futures trading of multi-asset classes, including equities, currency, interest rate products, as well as varied forms of agricultural commodities contracts. NSE 20, in an interview I gave to the FT, I was talking about how they were innovating and saying they were creating a complex platform, and this is evidence of that. Car in General reported full-year profit after tax slipped 11.851%. Interestingly, turnover revenue went up 17.6096%, trading now on a P of 8.371, Full year profit before tax down 8.353%. Earnings per share down 10.61%, 60 cents a share dividend. Said the year to September proved positive, though extremely challenging. Gradual depreciation of the shilling put pressure on margins. Investment in additional branches and new business lines, namely Doosan, Gabon, Toyota and MRF. Talked of a slowdown in the two-wheeler market due to introduction of VAT. We now need to achieve volume on an efficient base. Played a little bit of a more expansive game, therefore trimmed profits. Headline turnover is up. It's well managed and I think an interesting medium-term play. Kenya shilling trading around the 90.40 level. Nairobi all share had a torrid week last week. It's up 14.299%, but has fallen 6.774% since setting a record on December the 8th. NSE 20 just above 4,900, negative for the year, 19-week lows. McDonald's has invited investors to put in applications for a Kenya franchise, and the Central Bank of Kenya has awarded Safaricom a cash remittance operating license, enabling the telecoms giant to transfer money out of the country and opening new markets for its popular mobile money transfer service M-Pesa. Positive news. Once again, thank you for stopping by.